Hey, Jim Page here, fly fishing for the rest of us. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about fly tying today. So when I started fly tying, I had very little room, space, and very little money. And so my first vise was an inexpensive vise. Um, I had a minimum amount of fly tying materials that I kept in a Rubbermaid utility box and just a few bobbins and a few threads. And I tied, a number of flies, and it was just fine. I had a little tiny computer desk made out of particle board, which was about, you know, 2 feet wide, barely big enough for the vise and a few things. But I kept my little Rubbermaid utility box to the side on the floor and pulled stuff out and used it. And so it worked. So if you live in an apartment, or if you're renting a room, or if you just got a large family and you don't have a lot of space, let's talk about some of the bare essentials for fly tying that will get you started. You don't need a lot of stuff. Really, you don't. So, the first thing you're going to need are some hooks. And hooks come in all sizes. They come they come in little packages, 1/0s and 2/0s and 4s, number 4s. So the sizes I recommend, and this isn't for trout, this is for warm water and salt water. Get some size 4s, get some size 2, which I think I have some 2s here. Yep, I have some 2s here. Get yourself some 6s or 8s, and get yourself some 1/0 or 2/0s. And that could be number 1, 1/0, or 2/0. So the little size 6 and 8s, these little tiny hooks are good for freshwater and saltwater. You can use them for snapper, for panfish, crappie, small bass, baby tarpon. I've caught a lot of baby tarpon on size 6 and size 8. And these aren't the original packages. These are just a package. I have a little travel bag. These are just a package that I put in my travel bag. Size 4 is good for small redfish, sea trout, small snook, small bass, largemouth, and smallmouth. When I say bass, smallmouth and largemouth. And just about any other saltwater species you catch. A number 2 hook, a 2/0, which I have around here somewhere. A number 2 hook is kind of your standard. I have an 8 weight. I'm going to throw for redfish and sea trout and bonefish and baby tarpon and snook and bluefish and stripers. A number 2 hook is kind of a standard hook that we use a lot of. And then when you get up into the bigger fish, larger striper, larger redfish, like redfish in Louisiana, some of the redfish in North Carolina, big snook, say over 24 inches, tarpon that are bigger, say over 30 inches, big black drum. Then you want to go to a 1/0 hook and even a 2/0 hook. Now, if you end up with a 10 weight, 11 weight, and 12 weight, and you're going to go fish tarpon and other really big fish, then you're anywhere from a number 2/0 hook up to like an 8/0 hook. But that's a different conversation. We're just going to talk about warm water, freshwater, and inshore, near shore. No blue water, no tuna, none of that big stuff. Now, there are some times when you're bass fishing that Gamakatsu has a stinger hook. And it's thin wire with a wide gap. Some guys use it for redfish and peacock bass and tarpon. They like the thin wire for tarpon. I don't like these stinger hooks for redfish. I think they have a tendency to pull out, but these are great for largemouth bass, peacock bass, sea trout. I wouldn't fish them for grouper, and I wouldn't fish them for inshore grouper, and I wouldn't fish them for redfish. You can, but I tend not to. But they have a nice wide gap. They're good for spinning deer here. They're good for making any kind of bass fly. I'm not going to talk about trout, freshwater trout, rainbow trout, brown trout. Those get pretty complex, usually, and you can end up with a lot of different materials. So we're not going to really talk about that too much. You don't really need that many hooks and materials, but it can get really, really complex. So Get you a bag of size 6 or 8. I like Tempico. A lot of people swear by Mustad. I've been using Tempico for years, but get you a size 6 or size 8, size 4, a size 2, maybe a 1/0, and maybe a 2/0, and that will cover most of your needs right there. Now, the other thing you're going to need at times is some weight for weighted flies, if you're not using, especially if you're not using any kind of sinking line. So for weight, there's bead chain. Just plain simple bead chain. You can get them black, you can get them silver, you can get them in bronze. They're small, medium, large bead chain. Get yourself a bag of medium bead chain at a minimum, either in silver or black. There's flash, and if you get crystal flash, it's a little bit easier to manage than Flashabou. So just a bag of crystal flash, and you're like, well, what colors do I need in my crystal flash? I like copper. I like rainbow or multicolored. I like pearl, kind of white. I like the red for throats, beards and throats under the fly. And then, optional is a gold. So really, if you have copper, rainbow, pearl, red, and maybe a gold, that's all the flash you need right there. You can do a lot with that flash right there. If you want to get Flashabou, you can. It's a little bit harder to work with. It's stickier. It's a little more delicate. It does have better motion in the water. And this is what it would look like. It comes in all colors, sparkly, super sparkly, black. I do like black and purple flash. I didn't show those. But I do like black and purple flash on black Deceivers and black and purple Clousers. So some black and purple flash, or if you can only get one, get purple. That's great too. So you got your flash. You've got bead chain. Another thing you're going to need for weight is lead eyes. And it doesn't have to be lead. There's stainless steel eyes, there's brass eyes. If you're in an area that doesn't allow lead, then buy what the law allows. But some kind of, not a bead chain, but some kind of lead eye or some kind of weighted eye. It can be lead, it can be brass, it can be stainless steel or steel. And you need a small, a medium, and a large. So you only need a little bit of weight along with your little bit of bead chain. So I also recommend peacock herl. Peacock herl is great. This stuff looks so good. It has, it's got some greens and some blacks, and it shimmers and shines. It really doesn't move that much underwater, but the light reflecting off the peacock herl itself, it's a great material. You can put it on the top of your Deceivers or the top of your Clousers. You can also wrap it around a hook for a woolly booger body. It's just a great material. It's got great color. Like I said, it's like an accent. It doesn't provide movement, but it provides a really great accent. And, a lot of fish, like black crappie, a lot of your panfish species, bluegill, red breast, if you look at their back, they've got this kind of green, on the very top of their back, they've got black, but then they've got some green iridescence and some other colors showing through. So really, it's great to have peacock herl. So put that on your list. You'll need some chenille, and there's all kinds of chenille. And chenille is great for making whistlers. It's great for making woolly boogers. Like most of the whistler patterns call for some chenille as a kind of a throat, red chenille. A standard woolly booger, which is easy to tie. And it's more than just a trout fly. It's really a bass fly too. Olive chenille is a great one to have. I'm not sure the light. I got a new phone, and I'm still trying to figure out the phone and the light. Let me move this light a little bit. All right. So olive is a great color to have. Black is a great color to have. White is a great color to have. Chartreuse is a great color to have. And you can get cactus chenille or ice chenille. It's synthetic and it's got longer, the fibers on it are longer. Tim Borski's got some great fly recipes that use cactus chenille as a hot spot. So always have that. And then red. So, and you can put purple in there if you want. But these colors here, so you don't really need a lot of different, you can get as many different materials as you want. But have some olive, some black, some white, some cactus chartreuse, some red for your whistlers, and then maybe some brown if you want to try some brown woolly boogers. So that's about it. Doesn't take up a lot of room. So we talked about hooks, we talked about weights, we talked about eyes a little bit. You need some eyes, some little stick-on eyes, and these are shrimp eyes. So little stick-on eyes for your deceivers and other flies that you tie in salt water. Get yourself some stick-on eyes. Some foam for making top water, and you can also make trout flies out of foam. But gurglers is a great top water fly. It's simple to tie. Gurglers, keep some foam to tie some gurglers, and you also need some chenille for the body of the gurgler, so that is something you want to keep. Let's talk about some other things. Some tools and some glues. I tell people to get more than one bobbin. So you've got a bobbin that you put thread through. You don't need 5 dozen bobbins, but I would get more than one bobbin. I'd keep a couple of bobbins, and for thread color, you don't need that many threads. You need a black. Brown doesn't hurt. Chartreuse doesn't hurt. White is a good thread color. I've got some purples. I've got some olives. I would say olive is definitely a good color. So tan is another good color. Do you need this many bobbins? No. You can have 2 bobbins or 1 bobbin and just swap the colors back and forth. But really, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spools of thread will cover you. Will get all you need to do. So that really doesn't take up a lot of room. A spool of thread is pretty small. I have a lot of bobbins, but I've accumulated bobbins over the years. These aren't new bobbins. If you look at a spool of thread, a spool of thread is like this big. So 6 spools of thread, you're not really talking that much space, that much room. And this video is for people who are tight on room and space. Next, we're going to talk about bobbin threaders. So there's metal bobbin threaders. I don't like them. These are Renzetti bobbin threaders. They have a loop on one end. They're just monofilament. You stick them through. You stick your thread through, pull them through. There's nothing to it. It's simple. They're light. They don't take up a lot of room. They're cheap. This is what they look like out of the package. Put the thread in through the loop. Stick the end through the bobbin. Pull your thread through the bobbin. You can sit there and suck on the bobbin and pull the thread out, but I'd rather, those are better. So get some bobbin threaders. You can just get a pack. There's a bunch in a pack for $6. There's little EP. There's an EP brush that lets you brush your flies out, especially if you're using synthetic material. So get an EP brush. It's a little metal. And you can use a comb if you want. You don't have to use an EP brush. You can use a mustache comb to help smooth out or fluff out your flies or comb out your flies. Either one. Once again, these don't take a lot of room. Now, we're going to go and talk about glues, and then we're going to talk about feathers and bucktail a little bit. You can use all kinds of glue. The old standard is Days Fleximent. There's Loctite Super Glue Brush On. There's Zap-A-Gap Brush On. The new thing that has come out, which I kind of like, is this Loon UV Clear Flow. And basically it's a finish, it's a UV finish that dries when you hit it with a UV light. And there's other brands besides, there's Solares besides Loon. And you just get a little UV light, hit it. This one is actually chargeable with a USB. This takes up more room. So if you're tight on room, say if you're like, Jim, I'm going to put all my materials in a little toolbox or a little bin or some little thing, and I don't have a lot of room, you can use Sally Hansen Hard as Nails. A lot of people use this because they become sensitized to the UV light, so they can't use a UV light. So they just use Sally Hansen's. So that's it. So just whatever glue you want. The Sally Hansen's probably a little more convenient than the Days Fleximent. And the resin, the UV resins are real nice because they don't leave a scent on the fly. And you can do a lot with them. Like some are thicker, some are thinner. The thick ones you can kind of build up heads and bodies with them. So just you need some kind of glue. Technically, you don't need glue for a lot of flies. I know people, especially for permit flies, at the fly shop that I did tech support for, the owner didn't put glue on his flies because he didn't like the smell of it. He said, I think the fish can smell it. And he goes, I don't like the smell of it. Now, you go through more flies that way, but he never put glue on his flies. And he'd been fishing a long time. Get something to cut. So you need stuff to cut monofilament. If you're putting on weed guards, you need stuff to cut your bead chains. Don't cut your bead chains or your monofilament with your good scissors, your dolem. Dr. Slick has some nippers that you can cut with. You can just get some standard cuticle clips or snips or a nail clipper. I mean, there's nothing fancy there. It's cheap. It doesn't take up a lot of room. It's really good for cutting monofilament. For my bead chain, I've got these a little cheap pair of Ace hardware wire snips. See how little they are? And you can use them around the house too. You don't just have to use them fly tying. And I cut my bead chain with these. And they don't, I don't have to worry about dawning. And like I said, you can use them around the house for other stuff. Make sure you have something to pinch down your barbs. Some kind of little pliers to pinch down your barbs of your hook. I have these little pliers. You can use anything, any kind of pliers. Your fishing pliers, whatever you want to use. So let's talk about materials more. I'm kind of all over the place with that. I had stuff laid out, but I'm kind of getting ready for a trip to Texas. So my stuff is in disarray right now. Let's put up these glues. Let's put up this. I can go over there. All right. So what materials do you need? When you first start out, you don't need every material under the sun. You don't need 5,000 different types of materials. Jim's opinion, you need bucktail, you need marabou, you need some feathers, and you need bucktail, marabou, some feathers, and maybe some synthetics. We'll go over a little bit. Oh, you need some deer body hair and some calf tail. So we'll go over each one. All right, we'll start with bucktail. Bucktail is like a tried and true fly tying material. They come in different sizes. I recommend getting Chartreuse, olive, black, white, brown, tan, gray, purple, and yellow. Especially if you're in the Northeast, yellow is a good color for the Northeast. And that's it. So you've got, to start with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, with 9 different colors of bucktail. Bucktails are good for deceivers. They're good for clousers. They're good for bass flies. If you're spinning bass flies, you can put them as a tail of the bass fly. If you don't want to use feathers, they're good for funfish flies like gotchas for the wing. Bucktail is a great material. There's all kinds of flies tied with it. Bob Popovich out of New Jersey has some great patterns using different parts of bucktail. So bucktail is a basic fly tying material that everyone should have. It has good movement in the water. It stays, when you're in cold water, it still retains its movement. You know, cold water does not impact it. So I tell everybody, get some bucktail. Jose Huebe, I was watching one of his shows, and he fished conventional and fly. And they asked him, he said, if you had one lure to take anywhere in the world, conventional-wise, what would you take? And he said it would be a white bucktail jig. So there's got to be something to it. It just has good movement, and it's very versatile as a material. So the next material we're going to talk about is calftail or kiptail. So I use calftail or kiptail if I'm making really small deceivers or really small clousers. It's much shorter than bucktail. You don't waste as much material if you use this. It's a little slippery, so you have to really work slowly with it and make sure your thread grabs it. What colors do I carry, or what colors are your base colors? White, chartreuse, black, purple, tan, red. You can also use red calftail for the throat of half and halves. Purple is also, I got purple, black, brown. So white, chartreuse, black, purple, tan, brown, olive, and red. I don't have my olive and my brown ones here in my hand, but olive and brown also are good starter colors. You'll see some themes on my starter colors. So if you're going to Louisiana, there's some more material you need. And if you're making basically a modified clouser, it's just you tie on a rabbit fur tail, you put a body on it, you can spin a feather around the body, you can use rabbit strip cross-cut around the body, you could use a brush around the body, but rabbit strips, they have great movement underwater. And I like to start, I always carry black and purple and chartreuse and white. And I use it for tails. And Borsky has some snook flies that he uses like a natural bucktail, natural rabbit strip for. So you can put a natural rabbit strip, a black rabbit strip, a chartreuse rabbit strip, a white rabbit strip. And those are all good. Deer body hair is another good thing to have. I like it in black and white and yellow and olive. And you spin it around the hook. It's not that big. It's not that expensive. This little patch is like $2. This was $2.25. So you talk about black, white, yellow, olive are the colors. You can use other colors too. Black and white's for tarpon fly that Borsky ties, called the skunk. And then yellow and olive are good for doing bass flies. And you trim this stuff, you flare it, and then you spin it around the hook. It's not expensive. It doesn't take up a lot of room. it makes a mess, but it's good. You will hear some guys in South Florida using fin raccoon. It's a little pricey. They use it for a tail. If you do want to use fin raccoon, I'd get it in black and purple and chartreuse and orange. So, what else do we need to talk about? We talked about bucktail. We talked about deer body hair. We talked about fin coon. We talked about rabbit strips, which they use a lot of rabbit and trout flies too, big streamers. It has great movement underwater. The other thing I want to talk about is feathers. So, there's several different kinds of feathers. One feather that a lot of people like and has really good movement is Marabou. And Marabou comes from turkeys. They actually, some people call it turkey quill feather. I use it on tails of snook flies. You can use it for the tail of a woolly booger. There's Marabou. You can wrap it. You can use it for a tail, and then palmer it around the shank of a hook for the Chico Fernandez Redfish Madness. Marabou Madness. Yeah, Chico Fernandez Redfish Fly Marabou Madness uses all Marabou. Marabou tail, and he palmers it around the body and puts some eyes on it for weight to make it move. Marabou's a great. Marabou is like peacock. It's a great material. Has great movement underwater. Same with rabbit. It looks great. It's a little fragile sometimes. You have to be careful when you palmer it. And then for Marabou colors, kind of the same. I like olive and black that you can use for woolly boogers. And you can tie a big woolly booger for a bass. You don't have to just think, oh, a little woolly booger trout. You can use big woolly boogers for bass. So I like olive, black. If you're doing some stuff for peacock bass, you want to do some orange. And then white, if you want to keep some white in for woolly boogers. That's also another great color. And you know, these aren't that expensive. See if I got a price tag. You know, like this was $2.50. That's $5, but that's a really long Marabou for $5. So you're talking $2 to $5 for Marabou. So it's not that expensive. It doesn't take up that much room. It's a great material, has great movement. They put it a lot on tarpon flies, tarpon toads. A lot of tarpon toads have bunny strips, and then other tarpon toads have Marabou. And so it's a really good material for that. So let's talk about more feathers. So we're going to talk about some more feathers. So feathers, you can get feathers, strung hackle. This is strung rooster, saddles long, olive white. This was $8. This is another olive, strung. And strung are just, the feathers have string to hold them together at the bottom because they're not taking off the skin. So you've got strung hackle that are held together by string on the bottom. And then you've got the whole skin patch with the feathers on it. So the one thing is, this says saltwater Cape Hot Orange. This you can use for saltwater and freshwater. It's longer feathers. They're broader. They're not really trout feathers. You use them for the tails of deceivers. You use them for half and halves. You would use them for whistlers. You could use them around for hackle flies or seducers. But you notice that's the whole skin. There's a skin back there and all the feathers that are attached to the skin. So these tend to be more expensive than these strung hackles. They take up more room to store. So if you're in a really small apartment and you say, I'm going to just throw everything in one box, like I had everything in one Tupperware container. I didn't have any of these when I first started fly tying. I had strung hackle because it fit into my box, my little Rubbermaid box, utility box. So better flies, higher cost, take up more room to, better feathers, more variety in the feathers, higher quality feathers, higher cost, takes up more room to store. Lower cost, not quite the quality. Um, Takes less room to store. Better to start with, because if you mess up a fly and using less expensive feathers, it's no big deal. So, what colors do I like in hackle or capes? What's the colors for feathers? What I start with? Well, black, of course, all black deceivers, olive, and these are a little big for woolly boogers, but for a big woolly booger for bass, you could do a big woolly booger out of this. Olive, white, especially for chartreuse and white deceivers, red for red and white hackle flies for the throat. I do like a natural, just a natural barred feather for seducers. And it could be this, it could be this. Chartreuse is not a bad color to have. Yellow is also a good color to have. But you really, a stack of feathers like this, that doesn't really take up that much room either. You know what I mean? So, right? Now, if you had a stack of hackles, a stack of capes, it's going to take up more room. So, I'll demonstrate that. Let me get some more hackles. Not hackles, capes, I'm sorry. So here you can see this is a really nice whole cape. It's olive, barred olive. You can use it for woolly buggers. You can use it for deceivers. It's more money, and you can see how long that is. You can see how long that package is. You take an olive strung hackle. You see, there's just a lot more to store, and you don't want to bend this up or crinkle it up. You want it to lay flat. You want it to lay flat because you don't want the tips of the feathers to curl. And so it does, you can actually use up a lot of room. Here's a really nice brown for little brown woolly boogers, which you probably don't need those. Settle brown, it's a rooster. Now there's some flies called flat wing flies. They're flat wing streamers, and they're made very long, and they were first probably tied for striped bass in the Northeast. Beautiful flies, old fly, and I think they'd work for big snook because you can make them look like a needlefish. But you see how long those feathers are. Isn't that crazy? And then, like I said, you have to store those, and you want to store them flat. I actually had to get an under the bed box to put those in. But see, if you're tight on space wherever you live, it might not be feasible for you to have these. But like I said, I have an under the bed, just a cheap under the bed plastic storage box like you'd use for sheets or blankets, and I have these and some really long peacock curl and all my other feathers in that under the bed box because I can lay them all flat in there. So we went on through the materials, your base set of materials, some weights, some flash, and hooks, and you need a vise, right? So there's a bunch of vices on the market. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my preferences. A lot of your inexpensive vices have a clamp. I don't like clamps. You have to have a table to clamp it to. That's the right height. If you don't have a good table, the clamp could wiggle a little bit. You might put some scratches on the table. Your wife or your partner or your mom or your mother-in-law might not appreciate you putting clamp marks on their table. I like a vise with a base. So adds more weight, adds more expense. That's just part of the deal. But if you have a clamp vise and you like a clamp vise and that's all the money you have, then buy what you can afford. You can always upgrade later. So this is a Regal travel vise. I've had several other travel vices. I kind of like this design. One thing is the Regal, you just squeeze the jaws open. If you notice here, I'm just squeezing this and the jaws come open. So you don't have to adjust jaws. You don't have to worry about losing screws. You squeeze it, the jaws come open. You close it, the jaws tighten up. This is not a rotary vise. I prefer rotary vices, but this vise, the head does turn. If you'll see that, you can turn the head on this, which is nice if you want to look at different parts of your fly while you're tying. So that's important, is that you have a head that spins, even if it's not rotary, at least it spins. There's a couple other manufacturers who make really good travel vices. Ground Line. One of them just got bought out. Renzetti is one. I don't know if that other company. Dyna King is the other one. I have a Dyna King home vise. They just got bought out, and I don't know if they're going to change the name. But Renzetti is a good travel vise, decent travel vise. Dyna King is a good travel vise. The one thing I would say, if you're using a travel vise, especially if you're using a base, get one of these little. And when I bought that travel vise, this mat actually came with it. Get one of these little mats. Put your travel vise on. It'll keep from scraping up the table. It'll keep you, if you're using glue or Sally Hansen's hard as nails, it will keep glue from getting on the table, which is nice. It keeps your work area a little bit neater. So get a little mat. They're not that expensive. And so that is about it. Now, I've talked before, when we start talking about building up bodies, I would recommend getting one of these Mylar Tensils for building up bodies on different flies, like Joe Brooks Bonds. It's silver on one side, it's gold on the other side, so you only need one. And then there's also, I like this black Mylar Tensil for doing purple and black Joe Brooks Bonds for tarpon. Like I said, they don't take up that much room. They come in all different kinds of colors, so you can do just about anything you want with them. Let's see, I've got some other colors. Oh yeah, I got the silver holographic, which would be good for different kind of mackerel. Let me see if they got any colors. That's black, that's silver. I thought I had something fancier. Like gold holographic. If you want to do a tan and gold, a tan and olive fly, you can use the gold body on it. Some people only use one type of thread, and it's a monofilament tying thread. Some people only use a mono thread, so they only need one bobbin, and they use it for everything. And they can take a permanent marker and color it, or actually the thread, the materials under the thread show through on this mono thread. It's real slick. But if you want to get really simple, you can just get the one mono thread and use it. All right, so let's talk about storing all this stuff. So if you don't have a lot of room, you can use a toolbox. You could use a Tupperware bin that seals because you want to keep the bugs out, and you also want to keep your pets out. They also make, different manufacturers make these fly time travel bags. Now, they're a little pricey, and you're like, if you can't afford one when you first start fly tying, that's fine. Just get what you can afford and start tying. And so this one, let's see if I can show this. So this one has zipper pockets. That's where I put my materials in. I've got feathers, bucktail, marabou. I do have a few synthetics in there. Some brushes. My calf tail. It's got, there's my calf tail right there. So you've got multiple zipper pockets here. My stuff flies out of them as I show them to you. It's got a little It has a little Velcro pouch here. Oh, sorry. Got a pouch here, a cushion pouch here. I don't know where that Velcro's there. It's got a zippered cushion pouch here, and this is where you would put the head of your fly tying vise. So that head and those arms, you would put it in this cushion pouch. It is interesting. I never noticed that before. I got Velcro right here, but I don't know what it does. That's weird. I'm going to look at that more. I've always just put the head of my fly tying vise in there to protect the jaws and protect the fly tying vise. On the very back of this one, it's got a place for your threads here. You just slide them into little holes. And then your base of your fly tying vise, it goes here, straps down, which is nice. Alright, so you got place for the head of the vise, you got place for your threads, you got place for the base of the vise. Let me zip this up so they don't go flying. Then on the other side, you have a place here for your tools. So you got a little zipper area up here that you can actually put your glues in, like your Sally Hansen's hard nails, or your UV resins and your little UV light, or you can put them here. And then here you have little places for your bobbins, your scissors, don't stick yourself with one of these. Your bodkins, be careful with your bodkins, they're really sharp. So this is pretty thick material here to keep your scissors and your bodkins from going through. You got another pocket back here. You got another pocket at the very back to put more materials in. I usually put my hooks in this rear pocket. My hooks, my bead chain, my lead eyes, all my weighted stuff, and my hooks usually go back there. And my flash. I put my flash all in this back pocket. If you all see that okay. And then this particular model has a little fly tying workbench. So, I said, hey, get yourself a little pad, right? Well, this model of travel kit has a little workbench that you can put down on a table. And it has little areas here for hooks and beads and eyes. And it has Velcro here. I've got one of these tacky hook holders, fly holders, made by Tacky, and I stuck one of those on there so when I get through tying, I can stick it in this little holder. A lot of people take their flies, tie a fly, and stick it into a hardwood desk. That just dulls the point. I don't know why anybody would do that. And this little work area just goes right in the back here. So I can put everything I just showed you, except the big feathers. I put it all in this one bag. Include my vise, include the Sally Hansen, put it all in this one bag. That's all I need for fly tying. So a couple other things you might want to think about. I use a deer hair stacker. I stack my hair when I tie my flies, even my clousers, my deceivers. I try to get my deer hair even. So one of these is great. Talk about a good pair of scissors. You gotta have good scissors. I like to have a hackle plier to grab the hackle with when you're spinning around the hook. You can do it by hand, but I like having a hackle plier. And then bobbkins, 1 or 2 bobbkins. But like I said, you can start tying flies. That's all the room you need. That's it. You can do the same thing with a toolbox. You can do the same thing with a Rubbermaid utility box or some kind of utility snapping, locking utility box. You just don't need that much. Now you'll end up, as you tie more flies, you'll end up getting more stuff. And you'll get probably too much stuff, like I have too much stuff, but that takes a little time. And you really don't need to do that. So, and I know you're thinking, well, Jim, why should I even start tying flies? And I did a short video on that. And when I started tying flies, it was because of this fly right here. Let me get something to hold it. So this is a pink and chartreuse Deceiver. And where my family is from, on the coast of Georgia, years ago, many years ago, when Berkeley had power baits, not gulp, but power bait, we started catching a ton of sea trout, redfish, and flounder on a pink and chartreuse power bait. Power baits being the OGs of scented baits for salt water. They don't make them anymore. They went to gulps. But they called that color the electric chicken. And then they came out with a chartreuse over red, called that electric rooster, blah, 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 right? But the original power baits, there was an electric chicken, which was pink and chartreuse. There was a root beer, which worked pretty well. There was a white with a yellow tail that really didn't work that well at all. So there was just a few models of power bait, but we were killing the redfish, the sea trout, and the flounder on power baits. This was before I started fly fishing just about all the time. So I went into the fly shop in Atlanta, which I ended up doing a lot of business there and helping them with their computers. And I said, do you have any pink and chartreuse deceivers? Because they had some chartreuse and white, they had yellow and red, they had just your standard, and white, all white. They had just your standard colors, nothing very exciting. And they were like, two of the guys looked at me and they're like, you want a pink and chartreuse deceiver? I said, yeah, I need the color combination. And they just started laughing at me. I was like, okay. So then I walked away from them two guys. And they happened to have a pink bucktail on the wall. And I already had a chartreuse bucktail at my house, at my apartment. And I had that old cheap vise. I had my old cheap vise. I had some lead eyes. I did have some really good hooks. The Temco. I had some Temco hooks already. The guy who set me up fly tying, the guy who helped me, who was from South Florida, helped me pick out what I needed. Basically, I just went over about the same thing with you. He had said use the Temco hooks, and I've been using them ever since. And this was back in 90. Oh, wow. This was back in 93. So that's when he's like, oh, yeah, use Tempcos. They're the best. So I've been using Tempcos ever since. And I've used some other ones too, but I prefer Tempcos. So I had a chartreuse bucktail and I had white bucktail. I didn't have pink bucktail. And they just happened to have two pink bucktails. So I grabbed one of the pink bucktails and I went over to the power baits because my stepfather, he couldn't get any power baits. In the coast of Georgia, the local tackle store had run out. And they had 4 of the electric chicken power baits and one of the root beer. So I grabbed all of them and I asked the guy who was working there, not the two guys who laughed at me, I said, hey, you got any more of these electric chicken power baits? He goes, no. He said, and he at that time, now he's a personal friend of mine, he said, I ordered a few just to see if they'd work. I said, well, we're killing the fish down on the coast of Georgia with them. Can you order more? Because they weren't very tough. They would tear up after a few fish. And he said, yeah. He said, where are you fishing? And I told him, he goes, well, my other brother lives about 30 miles north of there. I said, is he using them? He goes, no. He said, I said, well, you need to send him some. So he did. And he ordered me more. And he was very interested in the colors I was using because of where his brother lived. And close to my family. So we ended up having a long talk. And he said, what are you going to do with that pink bucktail? I said, well, I got some chartreuse bucktail at my house, my apartment. I said, I got an old beat up vise. It wasn't old and beat up. It was just, I had an inexpensive vise. It was so inexpensive that it would get surface rust on it, which you don't want rust on your flies. So I quickly upgraded that vise when I started tying. I said, well, I'm going to take this purple bucktail home and tie some deceivers out of it. Like I said, I got Chartreuse, I got the lead eyes, I got the good hooks. I said, but that's the color, and I can't find them online, and no one has them. He said, yeah, no one has ever come and asked for a pink and Chartreuse fly here before. I said, well, they work for the conventional tackle for the power bait, so I'm going to assume they work. And I tied, as I dropped the fly, I tied some purple and, some pink and Chartreuse deceivers, and I caught a bunch of fish on them. And I went back and I told the guy who ordered me the power baits for my stepfather after my next trip. I came in and told him his name is Bobby. I said, well, Bobby, I tore the fish up with that pink and Chartreuse deceiver. And he said, well, I've got your power baits in here. I said, good, let me have all you got. I'll ship them down to my stepfather. I'll mail them down to him. So that started me tying flies because I couldn't buy this color combination, and the fly tying experts and the fly fishing experts at this one shop laughed at me when I asked about it, looked at me like I was, a moron. And the one guy who took me serious was also a serious fly fisherman, but he also fished conventional. He was the owner's brother, and he sat and talked to me, and we talked a lot about conventional and fly. So, that's what started me for tying flies, and I caught a bunch of fish on that. And if I hadn't tied my own fly, it would never have happened because it took years for this color to come in any of the fly shops. So don't ever be afraid to experiment with colors. If you conventional fish and fly fish, or if you have friends who conventional fish, ask them what colors they're using and what size. Size and color is very important to flies because they have no scent. Right now, in that same area my parents live, I'm catching all my fish on brown over tan with a copper flash because they have mud minnows in that area, and they're kind of a tan under brownish color. So don't ever be afraid to experiment. Don't ever be afraid to try. Talk to your friends who conventional fish, and if you haven't started tying flies, start. You just don't need that much stuff. You can get a lot of stuff. You can spend a lot of money. But like I said, everything that I need to tie the flies are in this bag right here. And that's how much room it takes. You can stick it under your bed. You can stick it in the closet. It just doesn't take any room. So I hope that helps. I know I've been all over the place with that. I got to get my fly tying desk back in order because I got to tie some flies to go out to Texas next week. Everything's a mess right now, and I've got this new phone that I'm trying to use. Hopefully this turned out well. I'm still learning the phone, and I got a new camera to use when I'm out in Texas. So more videos to come. Thanks for your time. Remember, sharpen your hooks.